Welcome to the Lance Wallnau Show, Level 10 Living Saturday. Focus is all about you. We do 5 days a week where we look at the prophetic perspective of what's happening in the world, but it's on Saturday that our most popular product, actually, of all the training that I do, this one is the most superlative, the best received. And it's because it focuses on stuff that normally most teaching doesn't do. You know, you've heard a lot of great sermons on the Word of God and on confessing and on believing and on faith and on overcoming adversity and et cetera. But we really go into a little deeper dive on this because we go, as you can see from our last week, where we talked about, the experience of Daniel and his associates being castrated and going into Babylon and what the factors that might have played in terms of shaping their worldview. This week, we're coming in off of that message, and we're looking specifically at what are the belief systems that are in you that you might not even be aware of, and that's the part that I really want to get into. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, I love studying temperament and design because it shows so much about the way people are made. Mm-hmm. I've got Carl with me here today. I've got Mercedes with me here today, and of course, I'm Lance. So. We're going to be your Sherpa guides up the mountain here to see where God's taking you. And one of the things which I was going to go into there is that temperament has a lot to do with self-talk and the way that what people say to themselves is very much connected to the design of the way that you're made. Mm-hmm. And the Bible has some extraordinary stories about people that are just like you. You'll find yourself in this book, and you'll find that the stories that you say to yourself are often designed so closely to the way that you're made that if you can actually get handles on your design, you can almost step out of yourself and get an objective look at some of your internal battles. Now, Mercedes, you were talking earlier today when we were off the camera outside about how a lot of warfare, you believe, is spirits talking to you as though they were you.
Yeah.
Amplify on that for a second.
Yeah, I think that that's probably the greatest battle that Christians face. I mean, there's so many books on like battlefield of the mind, and that it's really between these two ears where that's really the warfare. And so I think that's really where Satan does most of his damage. If he can convince you of something and you agree with that thing, then it begins to define you, right? And so, and always upsets me about the devil. He's no respecter of person. So the earlier he gets these lies in that you now agree with, and you say, well, that's truth, right? Like if you have a parent that says, you're so stupid, you're never going to get this, you're so dumb. I mean, like there's some parents, I mean, it's weird to me to think about, but there are parents who speak that over their children. And then that lie gets embedded inside of them. And then they grow up thinking I'm stupid. They grow up thinking I'm just not smart. I mean, from my own life, I'm really not good at spelling. So I moved like 7 times before I was 10. I was probably in 5 different school districts. And there was a time actually here in Texas where they didn't teach phonics. And that's when I was here in Dallas and I was supposed to be learning phonics. So I went from here to California and they thought like I was like developmentally delayed. They're like, what do you mean they didn't teach phonics? Or, and you're like, well, I don't know. I'm like in 3rd grade, So I really struggled. And I mean, like there'd be a spelling test and I would just throw it. I would just like, you'd line up at the board, talk about high anxiety, and I was like, and I would deliberately spell a word wrong so I could sit down. Same thing, like another high anxiety moment as a small child, you go around and it's like, you're doing like your reading in rounds and you take a paragraph, And so I would count the kids in the room until it got to me and I would practice my paragraph in my head. I'd be saying it out loud because I really struggled. But I'm saying this is a lie. This is something I carried inside of me that I'm actually not smart, that I'm not smart. I didn't actually realize that I was smart until I went to college. And I took Psych 101 for the first time. It was the first time I actually tried. I read a book, I took the test, and I got a great grade on it because I had this embedded lie inside of me from a very young age. So when you talk about, when you ask me to, hey, amplify that, that's one example. But it could be, you could have a parent that shames you for how you look. Like maybe you have a thin parent who really has like an eating disorder and you're a kid and they're going to shame you into how you look. You start believing these things at a really young age.
Or
and
comparisons.
Then you define yourself.
Parents make comparisons. Yeah. Why can't you be like your sister? Why can't you be like your brother?
Totally.
Why can't you be like your father, like your mother?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
And it builds, and the devil's like a strategist, right? So it'll just layer and layer, and it's like that's really what God's so great. Holy Spirit's our counselor as well, and He begins to unveil these things and show us. Well, where did that idea come from? Like I mean, I have so many different examples, but my last CEO, I have this other thing too inside of me, like my worth, my value is tied to my compensation for some reason. I don't know why, but anytime I have to negotiate any type of salary package, it's always amplified with emotion. So my last CEO, when I was working with him, the company really took off and we needed to adjust my compensation plan. I had so much anxiety around it. And I had this feeling of like he's going to take away from me. And we're in the middle of this conversation, and God bless him. And he's like, Mercedes, when have I ever not taken care of you? When have I ever put my needs ahead of your needs? And I really stopped and I had to think about it. And I was like, he's never done that. But I was unconsciously making him pay for the sins of other men in my life that I had been raised around.
Well,
and
how
I
about
thought,
this? How about this weird nuance?
Uh-huh.
How about the genetic inheritance? That's the generational bloodline.
That's crazy.
I mean, suppose you're racking your brain. You grew up in America with parents that were middle class, upper middle class business. You weren't ever stuck negotiating an allowance and taken advantage of by your dad for taking out the garbage. So where did this deep root come from? I'd say that it was in you as a fault line before you were. I often feel this way with Carl. I feel like Carl is upset with things that have nothing to do with growing up, but he's the reservoir of the family history. And so as children, I see a lot of my dad in him.
Yeah.
And I look at him, I go, it's funny. You remind me so much of which is an affection thing. 'Cause I love my dad so much. But I think that we really are working out more of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I can show you in the Bible where Isaac and Jacob are dealing with Abraham stuff, and the generations are affected by the blessings. You get the benefit, and you get the bad too, and you get the privilege of sorting it out. Is what I'm saying.
Well, and that's wild too. So like I had a season. So my degree's in psych and biblical studies. I double majored, and I went to a Christian college. So one of the things we learned wasn't just a family tree, but a spiritual family tree. And it was wild to do. So you start writing down, well, what does my dad struggle with? What does that side of the family struggle with? And you go up. And then you do your mom's side, and you start going up. And you're like, oh, this makes a lot of sense of why I struggle with the things that I struggle with. Because I do think, I agree there's genetics, there's chemistry, but I do think that there's spiritual forces too, that it's like, hey, you're also getting all of this.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah. Years of addiction. Hey, maybe don't go to a bar. It's like, it's that type of a thing.
For real. I mean, this is true. If you look at the family's background, if there's addictions like alcoholism, then you look at the kids and the grandchildren, they have a proclivity for, or they can get triggered by. And Carl, to your point you're always making is, it's not all mystical. It could be biological.
Yeah, right. There definitely is a mystical element, in my opinion, but a lot of it can be chemical, to use your word.
We should have on the show talk about this. Wentrick. He has one of the, I think it's in Alabama. He spoke at our dream trip a few years ago at the Trump Hotel. And I met him at the Elijah List cruise, and I met him and his wife. They have some of the largest treatment facilities for mentally disabled. Like
we'll get him for a broadcast.
We have to because I asked him this question. We were on the cruise, and he told me what he did, and they're Pentecostal, and I was like, how much of it is biological, chemical, and how much of it is spiritual? He's like, it's about 50-50.
Really?
50% of it's spiritual.
Okay.
And like deliverance, they'll do deliverance. They'll do all the natural stuff too, because you need to. But then they also add a spiritual element in, and like full deliverance, huge turnarounds. His own story, he was the janitor at the mental health facility, cleaning toilets and stuff, gets saved. And we talked about Daniel in the last broadcast, starts to get supernatural wisdom, works his way up from janitor to owner, and has expanded the business. I mean, I got goosebumps talking about it, but he's an amazing guy. I'll give him
What
a
a level 10 story. I mean, we met him at a level 10 dream trip. True.
Yeah.
Where I was looking for speakers.
Yeah.
Carl, I mentioned about, jokingly somewhat and half serious, that children sometimes are battling battles they think that is their own battle, but it may not be them. There could be generational things that they're working through.
Yeah.
And it sure makes a lot of sense if you think about it from a spiritual perspective. Strongholds that one generation didn't defeat will have to be defeated by another generation, perhaps.
And maybe I'm misremembering it, but aren't those strongholds then stronger as a consequence of having gone through multiple lineages?
I think you're right. I think that the more that the familiar spirits, the Bible talks about familiar spirits, which, think about it, are family spirits. They're spirits that are in the bloodline that somehow have been able to insinuate themselves into the way in which a family thinks in its own belief systems. Mm-hmm. And so let me for a moment just leap down on page 18 so we can drive through this. Global beliefs about money are formed in similar ways. What happens if you're nervously talking around your kids about money? You're fighting about money. You're complaining. Your parents are arguing about not having enough of it. They're stretched and stressed out about finances. It puts a belief in children that money is negative. Instead of money as a resource provided by God, money becomes a scarcity that is the source of strife.
If I may also interject, though, the love of money is the root of all evil. Having grown up in the Christian faith and in a Christian home, that was something that was driven home. But it was never a nuanced conversation about having money, having abundance, taking care of those you care about, having enough to be able to provide for others. It was, no, the love of money is the root of all evil. So you shouldn't love it. You should be trying to get rid of it as fast as possible. That was kind of one of the
guilt associated with having it, which creates a strange schizophrenia, because then you're trying to believe God for it and feeling guilty when you get it.
Yeah.
So the point, and by the way, I noticed this when I was talking to Christians, especially. One of my best-selling trainings I did in a secular event was an Isogenics conference, I think it was, or maybe it was a Melaleuca. It was one of those network marketing companies, and I spoke about the power of competing commitments, because for some reason network marketing is a major thing attracted to, like with the essential oils now. Christians love it. Christians love network marketing. Amway is such a large number of Christians do it. And there's maybe a lot of reasons why, but I'll tell you one of the problems with it is that if you have a Christian sense of, well, I want to be able to give, I want to be able to sow, I want to prosper, I want to have, and I believe all that. But if you also are feeling guilty about having money, then a competing commitment comes in that when it's time for you to ask, you send out messages that are kind of like the scent we talked about in the previous broadcast. You can smell it. But for instance, I was struggling through this whole thing myself because I felt tremendous guilt, because I grew up as a kid from what would be considered a above average, middle class family. And so I felt guilty hanging around Pentecostals when I got saved, because they had such a culture of living by faith and scarcity and frugality and generosity. So they were like giving their money to missionaries and stuff like that. And I was feeling guilty that I grew up at country clubs with,
affluence.
Affluence. When it came time for me to ask for support financially, even though I'm broke and doing ministry, and now I'm joining... like I'm numbered with the transgressors. I'm with the religious crowd, and we're all miserable broke, and we're asking people to help our nonprofit. And the person who's watching me said, "Look at what you did." They recorded me. I stepped forward as I made the appeal for what God was doing, and stepped away as I asked for help and support. They said, "Notice how you backed away from the audience when it came time to ask, and you moved towards them when you cast a vision. You're more comfortable talking about what God's called you to do than you are humbly receiving help from other people getting it done, because you feel guilty asking for help." That's self-sabotage. So in the sales training, I talked about people that feel guilty closing a sale because at some unconscious level, they're sabotaging the sale. They might talk too much. They might create anxiety and tension around it. There's any number of mechanisms that can sabotage closing the deal in sales or otherwise. But half of the audience put their hands up and said that was them, because the Christian community at large is eager receivers, but but guilt-ridden in acquisition. They want the end, but they're uncomfortable with the means. So now here's where I want to go.
All right.
And it's really, we're getting there. We get stuck in these programs here. We're halfway through page 18, which you want to get, by the way. If you're not with us, you're missing all the great training that we have. And this stuff is transformative. I'm telling you, transformational. Your beliefs, certain global beliefs you have. For instance, fill in the blanks. Women are Mercedes.
Beautiful.
Men are.
Okay. I was just like,
And that's the truth, ladies and gentlemen.
there's the ungodly
Welcome
belief.
to Level 10 Living.
The world is.
the world is, I was going to say optimistic. That's the first thing that came to
But
mind.
you're looking up. Carl, what would you say when we talk about money is?
Means to an end.
Okay, money is.
Power.
Look at that. Money is power, or money is a means to an end. Money, for me, freedom. See, money is how I trade time for to do what I want to do. So to me, money is nothing more than free. I'm free to do what I want, which is why money sometimes frustrates because it gets in the way of me doing what I want. All right, how about Carl? Women are?
Oh, gorgeous.
All right.
Don't be so dismissive with that nod. All right, yeah, sure. Good job, Carl, pandering.
Well, because you guys are giving positive connotations. I think you're feeling the pressure to have to do. I think
What
there are
would you
people that
say?
go,
What would you
women are complicated.
Oh, the guys
I
in the
can-
back are
I-
laughing. I can hear him. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
and I can hear the comments pouring in right now.
Complicated.
Men are struggling.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you believe in statistics.
Yeah, so the world is dangerous.
Oh, you put dangerous?
Well, I'm just telling you, there are people out there that think that, and I
Yeah.
think sometimes I think that. I think that women are complicated, men are. I feel sorry for them, and the world's a dangerous place.
So glad people come here for encouragement.
I come here for love. Why do you think I do this? You know the old story
do it
about
for me.
why the therapist is doing therapy. Why is the counselor doing counseling?
So true.
I needed it. I needed it because I was working through 3 generations of complex Jewish guilt. Now, your
like this
beliefs
game,
about your experiences and the world
Game's over.
around you are, and so this is like for money. So for Mercedes, when she goes, this is hilarious because I can attest to the fact that she does have this belief system about, she starts getting all upset, discussing financial things. And, but she has an alter ego too, which is you also kick into let me tell you something, where you wouldn't be. It's almost like, oh my God, it's like the Ethel Merman character from It's a Mad, Mad World. I go, what in the world? So I get lectured or I get her going through a crisis, but either one.
That's not true. Those are
I
not
don't
my
think-
two personalities.
That's not the polarity.
your normal ones.
Reduced
They're not your
to-
normal ones, but they would be your archetypes that I would say, get in the way.
Like an Enneagram, when it's unhealthy, it goes this way.
Yes,
but
yes.
if you're healthy,
Well, when
you're
it's
like-
unhealthy
Let's add
for me,
that caveat.
when it's unhealthy for me, I don't like asking, and it bothers me because money is freedom. Therefore, having to deal with it is bondage.
Why?
You see, but
But see,
that's
this
it's
doesn't make
not. It's
sense
hard
to
to
me, though.
explain why. I just want to have. I want
But
to
how
have.
can money be freedom? It sounds like not dealing with money is freedom. Dealing with money is bondage.
That's what I'm saying. Money
But
is.
not dealing with money. So money to you don't like it in general.
Why do you say that?
Because I don't think, based off of what you're saying to me, I'm trying to say back to you what I hear you saying.
It's true for the most part. You know this for a fact.
Mm-hmm.
I can't be bothered with it.
Why are you saying that? It's a true statement. Why are you saying
It's
it?
true.
Why are you saying that?
I just wanted
Yes, I
her to
know.
give some evidence here to convince me she knows
But
why.
I think we need to change that.
All
that
of these. Listen,
ungodly belief.
I'm doing this program telling you that I got it together in a lot of ways at my age, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
However, I will tell you this, that it's peeling back the layers of the onion. The real fun in life is saying, I'm doing good because I've dealt with these issues. I want to go deeper with them. I want to go deeper because if you want to go to the 10 times multiplier,
Yes.
you're going to have to change some things. And today I decided we're going to go 10 times.
Cool.
We have to change some things, right? And where does it have to start? Right here. Remember this? When you've got your finger pointing at somebody else, you've got at least 4 fingers pointing back at you, or 3, technically, pointing back at you. So I'm looking at myself right now. I'm saying, what are my global beliefs that I got to change?
Yeah.
Now, a belief, I believe, is like a frequency. I'm going to segue here to a very powerful concept, and it could be very new agey. So you tell me if you think this is true.
Let's do it.
Your beliefs about your experiences and the world is shaped by the agreements that you're making with the universe around you. Men are like this, women are like that. You can't trust people. The world is... When you start coming to global beliefs, it's a form of agreement. The question is, do agreements that you make empower stuff to show up? As a Christian, be very careful about what you agree with, because you're authorizing access.
Also, there's the cognitive bias aspect and frequency illusion. So we see things as we are, not as they are. You've heard that saying?
Amplify.
Okay. So seeing things as they are, not as we are, implies that we take with us our own perspective, our own lenses into anything and everything that we do. Also, the brain is a fact-finding feature of the human condition. So one thing that the brain wants to do is prove itself right, to reassure itself that it's acting in accord with the universe, so to say, right? At least in our very real, permanent surroundings. What that also means and implies is that when we see things as we are and we have a bias against something, we are constantly seeking out stimuli and information that reinforces that conviction or that thought.
And man, that is so powerful right there, folks, right there. Listen to what he just said. But I don't want to lose what I said before that, because it's a very powerful thing about your agreements. Your global belief systems, in a way, are your agreements with the way the reality is, and your agreements authorize something. And to now combine that with what you're saying, I read Twitter threads, for instance, and for the most part, Twitter's the one last place I can go where I can get really annoyed, because in our echo chambers that we live in, we weed out people that disagree with us.
Yep.
And we live isolated. I'm listening to Tucker Carlson saying what I believe is true. By the way, I think he is accurate. But I can't forget the fact that there's somebody else watching Rachel Maddow who is agreeing with what she says is true.
Foolishly.
And both this other person and I are accumulating data points to reinforce the prejudices of our own global beliefs about the other side, so that you get this mounting polarity growing up in communication. And the two sides do not know how to dialogue with each other, because as they keep going, they actually are building more and more evidenciary data saying these people are selfish and crazy. So I'm listening to, and you know when you can find that is only if you have the humility to question your own beliefs, so that you can kind of catch where sometimes you need to change your thinking.
I think this also goes to a greater conversation about how we view the world, and the I'm trying to remember the actual terminology for it, but it's the I versus it, where I am no longer viewing the opposition as people. I don't view them as my equals. I don't view them as my countrymen. I view them as a monolith. That's the left. That's the progressive ideology. And then it's a separation, because now instead of it being, I'm talking about people, I'm talking about ideally individuals who are actually pursuing their version of truth and their true moral compass. Instead of that, it's now, that's a rat, that's a piece of garbage, that's a piece of filth. I want not only nothing to do with that, I'm disgusted by it.
Which is why, as I'm reading Twitter, to make my point earlier, is when I read Twitter, it is infuriating, because you realize how the shortness of the space you have to communicate forces you to truncate deep thought into just statements.
Yeah.
And that's a real disadvantage.
It's a huge disadvantage.
But what you realize is there are people that are revealing their worldview in a soundbite, and some of it is highly irrational. So if you're not in agreement with me, then you're a piece of this.
Yeah.
And so you realize there's no real comprehension of a larger, more complex world.
But I mean, for me, I don't know how you expect somebody that's a non-Christian to engage with you in what should be a Christian's response, that you are intrinsically valuable. You're made in God's image. He has a plan for your life. You may not be in tune with it right now, but God loves you. And so I'm going to then reflect that to you and how I respond to you, and tell you truth, but in love and out of respect. It's like, I don't know how, that whole community is just always going to be like that. And then on top of it, I watch some videos online and stuff, and it's like that abortion debate. Man, try to have an abortion debate. You can't. Just the ability to have a conversation is shut down, and you're like screamed at, you're yelled at. So it's just odd to me, but I think we need to try to do it. To your point, you got to engage with them and then reframe it. And it's like, hey, I love you. We don't agree, but God loves you, and I'm going to treat you with respect.
And Carl's quoting, I believe it's the German Jewish theologian and philosopher Martin Buber. who exited Germany as Nazi ideology took over, and he taught about the I, thou, and the I, it.
Yes, sir. That is it.
And he wasn't a Christian. So I find that Christians should have an advantage in that there's this built-in, because we have sinned and we are always checking ourselves out, we ought to have more of a humility switch in us that recognizes we could be deceived. So I'm always double checking to see what the truth is. I don't know that most Christians do that. I think we could be as opinionated as the left. Politically, my tribe doesn't really think through the proposition. They believe what they believe, but they're not very generous with understanding the complexity of where the left is coming from. At least I want to be able to look at both sides.
But I mean, if you're a Christian, you should be exuding the gifts, the fruit of the Spirit, right?
Well,
peace, patience, gentleness,
the wisdom
kindness.
that is from above, James says, is first of all pure, peaceable, and open to reason. That if it's the wisdom from God, it's actually open to dialogue, which is interesting. As opposed to getting shouted down and prophetically shamed, it's engaging a curious conversation. God is more in the conversation than he is in the shall nots and shalls.
Yeah.
But but let me just complete the thought here. That your global beliefs, because we went 2 minutes over, your global beliefs and your agreements actually create a spiritual environment around you that can be rather intense. So it's like a frequency that you're releasing that could be attracting to you people, circumstances, and even spirits that align with your belief. So that if I'm in an I-it relationship versus I-thou, Buber said, I-thou means that I totally disagree with you, but since you are made in the image of God, I have to treat you with the dignity of a creation that is wrong and dangerously wrong, but yet made in God's image. Whereas if you take religion out, you take God out, then you go pure secular, like a lot of the Twitter feeds I'm in where they're mocking religion. They're so enlightened. What you've reduced it to is actually a less elegant conversation. It's an I-it. You're not made in the image of any design that I have to respect. You're a vermin, you're a rodent, you're a species that if we could get rid of you, the world would be a better place.
You shouldn't get medical care if you haven't been jabbed. You know, I mean, there are public figures that come out and said that if you don't share this worldview, you're not entitled to health care. You're not entitled to any type of organ transplant. You should have your children taken away from you. I mean, it got really intense during that entire time.
And I would say that if you took a look at the rise of Nazi fervor in Germany, that there is a frequency that's released, that global beliefs that are bought into and passionately bought into form global agreements. And you can create community-wide agreements or national agreements.
Yeah, 100%.
That actually allow spirits to have access to a nation because agreements authorize access. So that's why it's important to shut out ungodly beliefs and replace them with truth as much as possible.
Did you know I saw a video the other day? Poland is the only place that has not had a terrorist attack. That everywhere on the globe, it's the only country that has not had a terrorist attack.
I don't know why that would be.
Well, but I think it's interesting when you say global agreements. It's also one of, if the most outspoken. We are a Christian nation. We've been a Christian nation. I mean, from the time when the Pope came and visited, that we are a Christian nation, and they're very intentional about that. So I thought it was fascinating because you talk about global agreements, things that resonate, frequencies, and you're like, I wonder if at a national level that has an effect like that.
If you long for a deeper conversation, folks, like we're having here, which is, I think it's a deeper conversation. It's the kind of conversation I love to see. We don't normally get into with Bible studies. I would like for you to get the level 10. This series that we're in right now is on unlocking your own story, your own beliefs, your global beliefs, the beliefs of your parents. When you're renewing your mind, what are you renewing your mind from? The beliefs you grew up with, obviously, not someone else's beliefs. In this series, we actually give you a destiny map, which allows you to chart your childhood, teen, and adult years, and look at the ups and downs in that journey, and begin to look at what your thoughts and beliefs were in different stages of your life, and how they showed up in the circumstances you were in, or how they were shaped by your circumstances. One of the great tragedies I'm trying to get my head wrapped around right now is Mario Murillo texted me this morning a post where he says that 20% of teenagers are struggling with suicide in the United States. And
Those are just the ones that are coming forward, by the way.
those are the ones that are saying it.
Yeah.
And we are not a nation right now that is in bread lines and food lines. We're not in the Great Depression. The sirens aren't going off. You know, our cities aren't being bombed by rockets like London or Dresden. But our population of youth is unhealthier in terms of its resilience and ability to live than previous history, where youth had to survive under far more malicious and dangerous circumstances. Take a look at the power of transforming your life from the inside out, because we are not to be conformed to this world, but transformed by the renewing of our mind. And it starts by knowing what areas in your mind have to be renewed, and it begins by understanding your own beliefs and agreements and how powerful and all pervasive they are. And very seldom do we ever test them or check them out. But I want you to be able to look at page 19 when we come back again next week, but have page 19 in front of you. Because the activity is we're going to look at your own personal history chart, your own global beliefs, your high points and your low points, what you were saying to yourself, what God was speaking to you when it was working, and what the devil was saying to you when it wasn't working. Man, if you can catch that internal dialogue, you're going to catch the supernatural insight to see what's shaping your beliefs. So we're going to go there next week. You want to go to Lance Wallnau? Where is it? Level10living.com. Use the promo code PODCAST, and you get 10% off. Get a hold of the Unlocking Your Story and join us and jump right in. Thank you, Mercedes. Thank you, Carl. It's always good to be with you. Any final thoughts as we go around the table, coming around the corner? Are we interrupting you there, Mercedes?
I didn't know we were I thought we were landing the plane. I don't know we're taking off again.
We're landing the plane. I just want to know your final thoughts. You never know. Were you paying attention while I was talking, or were you doing something else?
I was listening. I was thinking about the whole depression thing, so I was going to comment on that. But
Well, what were you going to say?
Well, I mean, I don't really know what we expect as a culture when we try to convince kids that they came from rocks and you have no intrinsic value and you're not unique in any way, shape, or form. And you know, I mean, we don't tell them anything about God. I think that there's a great harvest opportunity there because, I mean, could you imagine being so purposeless and just have every opportunity in one of the greatest, if not the most wealthiest, even the poor people in our country are more wealthy than a large majority of the world. And so it's like to look at all of that opportunity and be convinced that it's not worth living for. You know, I mean, there's a really skewed worldview there, but I think there's a great opportunity for a harvest because the world has sold that generation of bill of goods, that God's not real and science is really your God, and that's what you should worship. And it's hopeless, and it has nothing in it that gives life. So I think it's a great opportunity for outreach and harvest there. When you've experienced the inauthentic, when the authentic comes along, it's life-changing.
Let me throw something at Carl here real quick that is important. I sent you a text earlier this week, which was, I arrived in San Diego. And when I got there, Mike Maiden was in the car. He was watching the end of the Jacksonville Jaguars game. He said it was one of the most fascinating football games. I felt bad that I was talking to him while he was watching the amazing story, which was this team, the Jaguars, came back from 27-0.
Yeah.
And actually were able to break through that 27-0 and come all the way back. And sports journalist Jay Busby reported that the Jaguars head coach, Doug Peterson, introduced to the team in training camp a philosophy endorsed by motivational speaker and former Navy SEAL Jocko Willink.
Yeah.
And Carl's been telling me about this over and over again. It's a worldview. Talk about global beliefs now as we're wrapping up. A worldview in a single word. It's good. When things are going bad, don't get all bummed out. Willink has said, Jocko says, don't get frustrated. No, just look at the issue and say, good. Good. After Jaguars quarterback Trevor Lawrence threw 4 interceptions in the first half of Saturday's game. Imagine that. That quarterback had 4 interceptions. He comes back and scores the most brilliant comeback in history in the second half. The first half, the lineman comes up to him after his 4th interception and says, good. It's all good. Lawrence then threw 4 touchdowns in the second half and led his team into history, the biggest comeback ever. Let's look at the challenges of today and say good. Carl, what in the world is Jocko talking about? What's that mean?
Basically, the idea there is that whatever feedback you get is now, how to say, it's all good. Not that it's all good that it happened, but now you know the parameters moving forward. So Jocko talks about applying for new gear when he was in the SEALs, when he was in SEAL Team 6 or whatever it was. It wasn't 6, I'm sorry. But he would apply for grants or for new gear, and then he would get the reply, no, you can't get it. And he goes, good, now I know what gear we can use. I know what gear we should use. I know what gear we will be using moving forward. So it provides a closer parameter around what it is that you actually can do. Also the idea of, okay, good. These guys, this team, are now in the history books. That's great. That's not just good. That means that these guys are
considering
going to be recorded.
4 interceptions in the first half is like the world's one of the worst quarterback games for the first half.
Yeah.
Reversed.
Yeah, completely. Just from a pivot in mindset. So Carol Dweck has a really good book on that. It's literally titled Mindset. I'd recommend it for people interested in that. The idea that anything and everything that does happen to you ultimately informs who you are going to be in the future. If you have that mindset going forward, good. Okay, so you're in a little bit of a depression. Good, that means that you can get better. Okay, your financial situation isn't where you want it to be. Good. Tell yourself how you want to improve, make the steps necessary, act on the lead measures so that way your bank account grows or your finances get more straightened out. Maybe you lose a loved one, you know? That's never a good thing, but good. Now they're with God. Now I no longer have to worry about their health. I no longer am concerned with their emotional well-being. Good. That's one less thing that's on my plate. I'm not saying people are things that are on plates. I'm just saying for the idea, the philosophy. Good. Now I know. Okay, I applied for a promotion, didn't get it. Good. Now I know this is my job. This is what I'm doing day in, day out. I don't have to worry about future endeavors because this is what's in front of me right now.
So it goes to a Tony Robbins technique, which is like Jocko's technique, and these guys come from a similar NLP training on performance. He says the thing to ask yourself in those moments is what's great about this situation, or what's the good thing about this. In other words, rather than say this sucks, this is lousy, I hate this, say, well, what's good about this? Well, at least that puts your brain at work to try to formulate what could possibly be coming out of this that you haven't thought of.
Yeah, if I may, there's a really good quote, and I can't remember who said it, but every setback carries with it the seed of equivalent opportunity. It may have been Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, possibly. But that idea is like, never let a catastrophe go to waste. You know, anytime that there is a serious setback, that means now you know what you can do with that situation and what you can't do moving forward. And also, there's likely going to be an opportunity for personal advancement or growth or development moving forward.
Sadly, in that run up to that 27 points, there was a gentleman who put a $1.4 million bet down, probably halfway through the game because he thought it was a guaranteed win, and he was going to net $11 grand or something like that, and he lost $1.4 million because of that comeback.
Good.
I was gonna say, I was thinking that when you tell that story, the guy's probably like, "Good, this is good. Now I know not to work with my money.
Now I don't have $1.4 million to bet."
Oh, it's so funny. Anyways.
Well, you're right. During training camp, okay, so they were playing the Jacksonville Jaguars were playing who?
LA Chargers?
No,
it's literally right here on my phone, but that's okay.
Is it the Chargers?
That's fine. Well, LA needs to be put in its place. You can quote me on that.
I like how Lance is like, no.
What are we talking about?
It's all right. I'm used to it.
Everybody at home, please go to level10living.com.
What is that magazine you ran and got, though? You left and picked up a magazine. What's that all about?
It's a book of possibilities. I thought that it had an excerpt from Discipline Equals Freedom, Jocko Willink's book, where he talks about the philosophy of good. It's in a different book of
Let's hold
possibilities.
the cover up so people can see that you actually have your own, Carl Conquers America.
Right.
I like that.
It's creamy, cheesy goodness, the rule breakers issue, plus win the day and oddities, how Carl Wallnau is single-handedly, crossed out single-handedly, reshaping pop culture, a 10-page visual history.
I still want to do a whole product around the Book of Possibilities. Because you say that like everybody knows what it is, but it's like a
Well, a book of possibilities
Those
is
who
a
know,
book.
know. Those who know.
those who know. But if
All right, so
Carl.
we've gone over, but I'm gonna cut this off right here because I did get where I wanted to go, which is that the collective mindset of the Jaguars team on its good enabled the quarterback, instead of being condemned and beat himself up and hate himself and get pulled out of the game, to actually redeem the situation. And how much life, how America needs to have a comeback. And I think that these stories are all good. It's not really you know what psychology is? It's sukiology. You know what suki is? It's the study of the soul. You know what the soul is? It's the realm that God made in you. So the study of the soul is sanctified psychology. That's what we do. We do Bible psychology, studying the soul from God's perspective. We're going to be looking forward to seeing you again next week at Level 10 Living. God bless.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge